G20 foreign ministers failed to find a joint resolution. And this from IOLCO.za. China and Russia refused to support G20 joint declaration. Both countries were the only G20 members not to agree to the statement demanding Russia's complete and unconditional withdrawal from the territory of Ukraine. And this is in New Delhi that China joined Russia on Thursday in refusing to support a demand for Moscow to cease hostilities in Ukraine. A statement from the group of 20 foreign ministers meeting in Delhi, New Delhi, showed. Lavrov told the assembled foreign ministers that Western representatives had derailed the meeting in an effort to scapegoat Russia for their own failings, disrespecting efforts by the Indian hosts to reach agreement on other issues. I want to apologize to the Indian presidency and to our colleagues from countries of the global south for the obscene behavior of some Western delegations, which have turned the G20's agenda into a farce, Lavrov said, according to Russian news agency TASS. Russia and China criticized the West for employing blackmail and threats against other countries. Moscow said following a meeting of the two countries' foreign ministers. And from Mina FN, Blinken says that Russia and China blocked the G20 summit, or statement, the G20 statement. China sided with Russia in the G20 format, blocking the adoption of a joint statement condemning Russia's war on Ukraine and calling to respect the UN Charter and international norms. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said this on Thursday during a press conference in New Delhi, following the meeting of G20 foreign ministers. Own correspondence reports. The chair statement by India today reaffirmed the declaration issued by the G20 leaders last year in Bali, which, and I quote, strongly condemned the war in Ukraine and stress it's causing immense human suffering and exacerbating existing facilities in the global economy, noted the head of the U.S. Department of State. He emphasized that Russia and China were the only two countries that made clear that they would not sign on to that text. According to the top diplomat, the 18 other members of the G20 confirmed that it's essential to uphold international law in the multilateral system. This includes defending all the purposes and principles enshrined in the Charter of the UN and adhering to international humanitarian law. In this regard, the U.S. Secretary of State emphasized that every member of the G20 and practically every country continues to suffer from Russia's war of aggression, a war that President Putin could end tomorrow if he chose to do so, Blinken emphasized. He said that the United States didn't want this war and worked hard to prevent it. Like most countries, we want to focus on the fundamental challenges affecting the daily lives of our people. So even as we stand with Ukraine, while it defends itself as any nation would in that position, we're also determined to keep working with other countries to deliver solutions to the shared challenges, said the head of American diplomacy. In this context, he drew attention to the need to respond to the unprecedented food security crisis around the world. Today, Russia is again slow-walking the export of food from Ukraine, and the Black Sea Initiative is set to expire on March 18th. Russia has refused to commit to renewing it. The message that countries set at today's meeting is clear. Extend the Black Sea Grant Initiative and strengthen it, and do that without delay. The U.S. Secretary of State emphasized this. As Ukrinform reported earlier, India's top diplomat said the G20 foreign ministers failed to agree on the final communiqué regarding the points concerning Ukraine. He also announced that the ministers would instead publish a final document rather than an official joint statement. And from theprint.in, no joint communique by G20 foreign ministers. Russia and China opposed two paras in chair summary. Russia and China opposed two paragraphs in the chair summary which referenced the Ukraine war. The same occurred in the document issued last week after the G20 finance ministers meet. As predicted by experts, no joint communique was issued following the G20 foreign ministers meet in Delhi Thursday, and instead, India, as G20 president, issued a chair summary. Two paragraphs of the chair's summary, which referenced the Ukraine conflict and had been lifted from last year's G20 Bali declaration, were opposed by Russia and China. The two countries had opposed the same paragraphs that had appeared in the chair's summary following the meeting of G20 finance ministers and central bank governors in Bengaluru last week. Therefore, in two consecutive tracks, no joint communique was reached. Both documents included a footnote that read, paragraphs 3 and 4 of this document is taken from the G20 Bali Leaders Declaration, were agreed to by all members countries except Russia and China, while paragraph 3 saw condemnations of the war in Ukraine and its impact on the global economy. Paragraph 4 urged countries to uphold the UN Charter on International Law. External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar had in a press briefing Thursday said it was significant that there was a consensus among member states on the bulk of issues that concern the global south and developing countries. There was a considerable meeting of minds, he told reporters, adding that when it came to discussions on how to tackle issues like counterterrorism, there was unanimous agreement from all member states. Foreign ministers from across the globe have flown into the Indian capital to discuss multilateralism reforms, food and energy security, counterterrorism, and other critical issues as part of the G20 meeting held on 1 and 2 March. And here's a take on this issue from Press TV.
Says the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says the Group of 20 has not issued a joint declaration at the end of its meeting due to differences between Moscow and Western countries. Lavrov said discussions over the joint statement faltered on several issues, including Russia's assistance on an investigation into the sabotage of the Nord Stream pipeline last year. Lavrov repeated Russia's call for an international investigation into the explosions involving Moscow. Western media reports said the meeting was dominated by the Ukraine war, with Western countries proposing a declaration that called for the withdrawal of Russian forces from Ukraine. China has also joined Russia in rejecting the Western proposal.
And here is what is called by the G20 a quad on Middle Eastern issues. We'll take a few minutes from this.
The Foreign Minister of Oman, Her Excellency Reem Ibrahim Al-Hashmi, Minister of State for International Cooperation, UAE, His Excellency Asif Said, Secretary, Ministry of External Affairs, and our moderator this morning is the lady in red, Meena Al-Oraibi, the Editor-in-Chief of The National in Abu Dhabi. Welcome to the stage.
For hosting us here. Delighted to be with you at the Ricina Dialogue. And as a couple of more people come in, I'll just introduce the session, though we've had a great introduction from our dear friend, Ambassador Suri. So, a region of opportunities from the Mediterranean to the Arabian Sea. 20 years ago, if we were meeting here, we'd be talking about war. This was the eve of the Iraq War 20 years ago, and the blowback from terrible September 11 attacks. 10 years ago, if we met, we would be talking about Arab uprisings, political transitions, lack of certainty. Today, the region is in a different place. Not everything has been sorted out, not everything is rosy, but we can genuinely talk about opportunities that can be fulfilled. The potential of the region has always been there, and yet much of it was lost. At this moment, we see the United States is a little less engaged, even if they profess otherwise. A real energy transition is underway and what it will look like for the region and the world. Regional leadership and alliances formulating and emerging, but also a region that continues to have a war in Yemen, difficulties in Iran, Horn of Africa instability, and key issues related to climate, water, lack of education in too many countries. So it's a mixed picture, but we see the opportunities. And so that's what we're talking about today, in the midst of course, the Ukraine war and the fallout from that war and the global polarization that we see. So I would like to start with Your Excellency, Minister Sameh Shukri. When we look at this region, of course, the Suez Canal is integral when we talk about the region, Arabian Sea to the Mediterranean Sea, but also Egypt's role as a connector for Africa, Asia, the Arab world. And currently, of course, you are president of COP27. So when you look at this region at a time of opportunity, in this moment of multilateral confusion, let's say, how do you see it, and what can Egypt do to try to simulate and stimulate some of these opportunities at this time?
Well, thank you very much. I'm delighted to be participating, and we are happy that the Middle East takes a prominent role in terms of this dialogue. I think the main issues revolving are the challenges, but again, the potential. And I think the greatest potential of this region is its population. It is a young population. It is one that is striving to integrate into the global structures, whether economic or political, and it continues to show its resilience and its ability to undertake new technologies and to promote its own well-being. Egypt plays a fundamental role because of its strategic position, because of the Suez Canal, which connects the East and the West, and because of its diverse relationships. Egypt is an African country, it's an Arab country, it's a Mediterranean country, it's part of the non-aligned, it's part of the global South, and it does, being the most populous in the region, have the ability to continue to cooperate on this traditional role as a connector between societies and between peoples, and to take full advantage. Over the last 7 years, Egypt has been on a road of development. It has invested heavily in elevating people out of poverty and creating job opportunities, and depending on infrastructure, the dual carriageway of the Suez Canal, I think, is a remarkable achievement in 1 year that has opened the greater doors of connectivity and the ability to impact some of the supply chain difficulties that were associated with the COVID and subsequently. But again, in the realm of renewable energy, our ambitions are unlimited. I think renewable energy has proven its economic viability and its ability to generate greater wealth, and prices have come down as innovation has taken hold, and we are now on the road to having a 42 mix in renewable energies, whether solar or wind, by 2035. So for all these reasons, we believe we can continue to play a very important and positive role in regional integration and regional cooperation in finding new areas of economic prosperity, despite the pressures associated with COVID, with the crisis in Ukraine, and the need to direct resources to the achievements that have already been demonstrated and the opportunities that are available.
Now, if we just stop for a moment on the climate issue, because as you said, there's opportunity there, but there's also major challenges, especially for our parts of the world, as temperatures continue to rise. When you think about the COP27 moment and trying to calibrate all the momentum that was built around COP, what do you think this region can come out with that can really lead to climate action?
I think COP27 was in itself a defining moment where we were able to maintain the momentum after Glasgow. Mental and competitive
region position itself in this energy transition as a way of opportunity?
Thank you very much, and thank you for the Ricina Dialogue's focus on the Middle East and allowing us the opportunity to discuss matters relevant to our nations, our regions, and certainly a larger collaboration with countries around the world. We're working pretty closely with the Egyptian team, and as my colleague Samah mentioned, the 4 tracks of any COP have to cover climate finance, mitigation, adaptation, as well as loss and damage, which Egypt managed to pull through in a pretty remarkable way. We've heard in past discussions here at Ricina that the international/multilateral system as a byproduct of the Second World War has been what has kept us as an international community relatively safe. And whereas that may be true, and frankly is true to a large degree, that doesn't mean that we can't improve on existing systems. And here walks in climate finance, but in particular multi-development banks. You're right to note that there is no shortage of liquidity, but the way in which funds are being allocated to countries that are transitioning or that are in need of capital for development growth hasn't really reformed, if that's the right term to use, over the last few decades. And as challenges percolate and new and emerging threats grow, we need to find a better way to be better. And we need to be more ambitious, because when we really want it, we can do it. Samah mentioned COVID, COVAX, vaccine development. In less than a year, we had an RNA vaccine. If that says anything, it says if we get our mind around something, we're actually able to deliver on it. That same fervor, ambition needs to find its way in some of the other challenges that we deal with. And if we look at climate,
and that's a good transition point for our next story. So watch this space. More world news coming up.